Well, hello again and welcome to another episode of the Hyperion Adventures podcast. I'm Tom. As always, I'm with my beautiful, gorgeous, outstanding, Rogue One loving wife, Michelle.
Thank you, sweetie. You're the best. Hi, everybody.
So good to have you with us. We are recording this episode on Sunday, July 28th, 2019. Wrapping up July, heading into August. It's incredible, right?
Absolutely. Hard to
believe. The year is flying by. Thank you for joining us today. In the future, you can find us most everywhere you get podcasts. Best place to find us, however, is on our own website, HyperionAdventuresPodcast.com. And I have added a new element to HyperionAdventuresPodcast.com. We are going to be starting a weekly newsletter coming up soon. So please, if you care about listening to us or getting more from us at all, I know we give you so much every week, and too much, many would say, but we would love for you to sign up for our newsletter so we can send some things your way.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to having some really fun and exciting things and kind of expanding on some of the things that we talk about on the show and giving a little bit more in-depth and useful tips.
Exactly, and you'll be some of the first to hear about any giveaways we may be doing, any events we have coming up, lots of stuff. We also may have eventually some merchandise for sale, but you also will be the way for us to share any information with you, our most loyal of our listeners.
Exactly.
So, by the way, also you can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iHeartMedia, lots of places. If there is a location where you normally listen to podcasts that you don't find us, let us know. We want to get on that spot.
Right, exactly. And we also really like this to be an interactive podcast, so we do love to hear from all of you. We're very active on social media, as well as you can reach out to us on our Gmail account, which is HyperionAdventuresPodcast@gmail.com. But as I mentioned, we're very active on social media, and we love to interact with people. Sometimes we put out their questions that we include your comments on our shows, and sometimes we just love to get that feedback.
Yeah, we're going to have some of those coming up in the near future. You can always find us socially on Twitter at Hyperion Podcast, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest at Hyperion Adventures Podcast. By the way, we continued our virtual 5K this morning with several other podcasts and bloggers. We had fun out running the second leg, the Ironman leg of the Run Disney Virtual 5K. We are out there this morning with Jenny from Disney DNA Podcast, who we were just talking to on last week's episode. Tony from Disney Discussions Podcast, DVC Nate and Serena from DVC Duo were out there with us. And surprise, we didn't even expect this to be happening, but Keenan and Rachel from Part of Our World podcast joined us this week. They will be joining us officially for our next leg of our hashtag virtual 5K in August.
Yeah, it's been really fun getting that interaction with everybody. And for those of you who have done the Run Disney Virtual series already, we'd love to hear from you and how it went, and how did you celebrate your virtual race?
Right. Yeah. If you we're out running at any time for these virtual 5Ks. Anytime you can post your pictures, post them with the hashtag virtual 5K, and we will be happy to retweet those, get those out there. And then we don't have a date yet for next month when we're going to do the final leg of this, but as soon as we know that, we will send it out there, and hopefully, you can hashtag virtually join us out as we go out and run the Black Panther medal leg.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And I know that actually there's some special ways to get that Black Panther medal at the D23 Expo, which is coming up here. And gosh, it's so soon now.
I know. Less than 1 month.
Yeah. Yep. It's coming up before you know it. And we're so excited for that. But let's get back to today. Lots of stuff for you today, including there's a new reservation process beginning for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at the Disneyland Resort. We now know when holiday festivities will be kicking off at the happiest place on Earth. And Disney passes yet another box office milestone. But let's get to today's main topic.
Yes, please.
So excited about this one. We're continuing our Star Wars Remembered series, and this is, I don't know if it's your favorite Star Wars film, but it's definitely right up there.
Definitely.
So Michelle has been excited about this for a long time. Let's get to our Star Wars Remembered series. This week, it's Rogue One, A Star Wars Story.
Whatever I do it to protect you. So you understand?
I understand.
You want to get out of here?
Our rebellion is all that remains to push back the Empire. We think you might be able to help us.
When was the last time you were in contact with your father?
What is this? It appears he is critical to the development of a super weapon.
If my father built this thing, we need to find him.
All right. How many do I need?
They are requesting a call sign.
It's, Rogue. Rogue One.
The power that we are dealing with here is immeasurable.
If the Empire has this kind of power, what chance do we have?
We have hope. Rebellions are built on hope. They've no idea we're coming.
Take hold of this moment. The force is strong. Make 10 men feel like 100.
We'll take the next chance. And the next. You're all rebels, aren't you?
Save the rebellion! Save the dream!
So yes, we're continuing our Star Wars Remembered series, and we are so excited about this one. I know specifically Michelle is for sure. Rogue One, a Star Wars story. And as always with our Star Wars Remembered series, we bring on our good, great, wonderful friend, Rob LeBerry from the Jedi Temple Archives podcast. Rob, thanks again for joining us this time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It sounded like I got a promotion there in that in the middle of that interview.
Well deserved.
Yes.
You're our go-to expert.
That's right.
I have 2 or 3 other experts here that just feed me this information and make me look good. So.
Nice. Perfect. It's like you got your own staff back there, your own Imperial troops helping you out.
Right.
So yeah, if this is the first time you're hearing our Star Wars Remembered series, we've been kind of going back and looking back because obviously we're ending the Skywalker saga in December with the Rise of Skywalker. So we decided that we'd go back and look at all the Star Wars films in chronological order. It's easy for me to say, leading back as it would play out within the Star Wars universe. So if you want to go back and listen to some of our previous episodes, we went all the way through the prequels. Last month we did Solo, a Star Wars story, and now it's Rogue One, a Star Wars story. And we are very excited about this one, especially Michelle and Rob are very excited about this one because I love Rogue One. They love Rogue One. So I expect to sit back and relax and let them talk about how much they enjoy this film.
What are we talking about?
Yeah.
This is
same old story,
right? Now this has been really exciting working up to this one. It is such an awesome film. It's a pivotal film in my little opinion. Rob, what do you think?
It's actually my second favorite Star Wars film of all of them. So right behind Empire Strikes Back. So, obviously I have pretty strong feelings about this film. I think there's a lot of things about it that make it very special. And we'll kind of get into that as we get into the detailed portion of the show.
Yes. So let's get to it. So Rogue One, a Star Wars story debuted in the United States on December 16th of 2016. It debuted actually in Europe a couple days before that, and then in China about a little less than a month after that. The pre-release for this film, as far as the hype, there was a teaser trailer for Rogue One that was released by Lucasfilm on April 7th of 2016. Trailer was viewed by close to 30 million times in its first 29 hours at a rate of 800,000 views per hour. We're in such a different age as far as these trailers and them being out there on YouTube and Facebook Facebook and etc. and Twitter and everything else. In June 2016, Rogue One was promoted at the Star Wars Celebration Europe 3 event in London. During that event, a new official poster was unveiled, which depicts a battle taking place on, of course, the tropical planet Scarif. And I think that actually many of the posters afterwards had Scarif in the background of it quite a bit, with the Death Star looming large in a blue sky above, which was printed the tagline, "A rebellion built on hope." And they also debuted a second teaser trailer, which was unveiled and screened just exclusively for the Celebration audience and not streamed online. It did eventually hit publicly in August during the broadcast of the 2016 Summer Olympics. So those were in Rio.
Right.
And I remember, was there anything more exciting than the Olympics than, of course, a Rogue One trailer dropping? Now, the interesting thing about these trailers, and I think you guys will remember this, is that the trailers showed a lot of footage that once we actually got to the film didn't exactly exist in the film. There were some things that were kind of close to it, but not exactly right. Do you remember that, Michelle?
Yes, I do. It was pretty, like you're saying, reflecting on it afterwards, it was interesting that there was quite a lot of things that were, what do you say, left on the
cutting room floor
yeah. or something, or it was just to throw us off. I don't know.
Yeah. Rob, do you remember the teaser trailers and kind of the footage that kind of disappeared?
Absolutely. I think the most iconic was the shot of Jyn Erso kind of walking out on the catwalk at the top of the tower there at Scarif, and the TIE fighter kind of slowly rising to take her in its aim. And when we got to the film, she didn't exactly have that same experience. She got out there, she was able to realign the dish, and it wasn't until after that the TIE came along and almost took out that catwalk.
Right. It was quite a bit different in that scene, and that was the scene in the trailer that gave me chills. I was like, oh, how's that going to play out? Well, unfortunately, we never saw it, but there were reasons behind that, and we're going to get into that as we go through our description, our details behind this film. Another scene that was cut that was a famous one, it's Jyn, and I believe it was Cassian as well, running across the Scarif beaches with the plans, in their hands, going, and that obviously was cut out because they did things in a different way through the film. So interesting. This was the first, we did this last week where we did Solo: A Star Wars Story, which was the second standalone Star Wars film. This was the first standalone Star Wars film. So interesting enough. Also, it's the first Star Wars film without John Williams providing the score for it. Michael Giacchino stepped in, took over. I know Rob has a lot to say about that. He's been excited to tell us all about it. So we're looking forward to hearing from you about that, Rob.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So we get to the cast, and I'm going to tell you what, this cast, to me, is magnificent. Some of the characters, these, outside of like the original trilogy characters, these characters may be my favorite within the entire Star Wars universe. I don't know what you think, Michelle.
Oh, definitely. It shows a lot more depth in relationships and a lot more complexity. Even though you may not know the origin stories of some of these things, you could just tell that what they went through to get to where they were, at the time of the film, was pretty deep. There's no question. There was a lot of character development, some interesting, in just a couple of days, essentially, of what happened there. I mean, several years from the beginning of the film to the end, but within the actual main plot line, just a few days. Rob, what are your feelings on the characters for Rogue One?
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about this particular film is that with an ensemble cast and only one film to really develop those characters and make the viewers have an attachment to them, I thought they did an incredible job. You actually cared what happened to them by the end of the film,
right?
At least for me. I know there were people that complained that they really didn't have that connection, but for me, the more I watch it, the more I realized that all the little subtle things that they did to kind of connect you to those characters were very effective. And I thought that they all did an excellent job of kind of carrying their own piece of the story, and together it really made up an incredible Star Wars story.
Agreed. I found the characters very relatable, all in different ways.
Right.
It was very incredible, Michelle.
Right, and like you said, Rob, I mean, they were characters that you really, became very interested in, and they were, I don't want to say likable in the sense that they were all likable, but they were all interesting and riveting, and I felt very engaged with wanting to know what was going to happen with them. And there was some friendships there that were like, oh my gosh, those were so deep and so I don't know how to describe it. They were, you wanted everybody there to succeed, and it was
there were people worth rooting for.
Right. Yeah.
Definitely. No question about that. So let's go through the cast here. Felicity Jones came off of her Academy Award nomination for The Theory of Everything to play Jyn Erso, who strong female protagonist. You could tell her allegiances shift throughout it, from looking out for mostly herself at one point, because that's what she kind of had to do, to where she had to kind of look out for the whole group and fulfilling what her father had set in motion, essentially. I found her character to be fascinating.
Absolutely. She did great carrying it. I didn't find any flaws in her character in how she portrayed it. It just, you believed everything that she presented to you in that film, and interesting to see how somebody could regain some of their, bases, their beliefs from childhood when they were, in essence, could have felt very abandoned in her situation.
Yeah, exactly right. Rob, your thought on Jyn Erso, Felicity Jones?
Yeah, I thought that her character was really well portrayed. I thought that kind of her loner mentality and the fact that she was kind of emotionally stunted, I guess, to some degree, tied in very well with the fact that, she lost both her parents for all intents and purposes early in the film. And, then the only group of people that she had any attachment to with Saw Gerrera's rebels also having abandoned her. So, it really is what led into the thing that you mentioned earlier about that very similar scenario to what Cassian was experiencing, and really that scene between the two of them in the Imperial shuttle after the attack on Edu, where Jyn actually did lose her father the final time, and Cassian's basically saying, you're not the only one who's lost everything. Some of us just chose to do something about it. That really was the dichotomy between their two characters. They really had both lost everything. And, whereas she was kind of just keeping her head down and looking out for herself, he had attached himself to the cause.
Yeah. Completely agree.
Exactly.
Speaking of Cassian Andor, he's played by Diego Luna in another masterful job, and I'm so excited for the series that's going to be coming to Disney Plus here to see more of him, because I thought he was fantastic, showing that kind of gray area. He's kind of an espionage guy, an intelligence guy, and that not everybody on the Imperial side was completely 100% evil, and not everybody on the Rebel side was completely 100% good, or at least not beyond doing some things that they needed to do to fulfill the cause. And I thought he filled that role wonderfully. Let's do it that way.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that I think of all the characters, this is one that, like I said, you want to find his origin story. You want to know all the things that he had to face throughout his life to be able to carry out some of the uncomfortable orders that he was provided throughout this story.
Yeah, Rob, your thought. I know you've already mentioned a little bit about Cassian, but any more thoughts on him?
No, I thought it was an excellent performance. I love his character. I'm so excited that he's going to have a series coming to Disney Plus. We don't exactly have a release date for that yet. I'm hopeful that there's going to be some of that information released at D23 later this month. But certainly Cassian is a great character. His tie to K2SO, who is another favorite of both myself and I believe Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And probably most people that watch this. You really can't go wrong with Alan Tudyk. But before we jump into that character, Cassian, the cool thing about Cassian and the way that the rebels were in general portrayed within this film is exactly as Tom said. It's now the varying shades of gray. It's no longer black or white. And this is really kind of Star Wars Band of Brothers, I guess. It's what I equate it to.
Very good point. Very good point. Let's go ahead and go to K2SO next. Alan Tudyk, kind of continuing to be, he was already a Whedonverse icon, being in Firefly and Dollhouse, among other Joss Whedon shows. And then, of course, he became kind of a Disney icon, doing the voice of King Candy and the Duke of Weaselton and Hey Hey, among other things. Then he comes in, now he's a Star Wars icon, playing K2SO, who I find fascinating. And, I was thinking about it as I was rewatching again yesterday. And he is almost, if you were to take C-3PO and R2-D2 and like mesh them together into one thing, it kind of reminds me of what you might think of K2SO. You know, he's willing to give you the stats, he's willing to speak his mind, but he's also irreverent, you know. And I kind of feel, even though you don't hear that specifically from R2-D2, if you could hear the language that he is speaking, if you could understand the language he's speaking, I think it'd be kind of similar to what K2SO does it a lot throughout this.
Yeah, I think I would put Wall-E in that mix too.
Wall-E. We're going to bring Pixar into this. We just mentioned some other things.
Mainly because you can see throughout the film that K2SO does have a heart, you know, and I know some of the things that, you know, where he just spurts out what he thinks due to his programming, but when he does things like, you know, apologize for hitting Cassian and, you know, some things like that where you feel like, okay, wait a minute, that was more than just a programming thought, that was a feeling. And I think that's what makes it, you know, that's where I would put the Wall-E part to him.
I gotcha. Rob, your thoughts on K2SO?
I think K2SO is my favorite robot in all of Star Wars and really in all of movies.
Right.
I mean, he is just, for me, the perfect character. It was hilarious first and foremost,
right.
But you know, he also, again, Star Wars is at its best when it is making you connect with characters, and one of the things that they've always done a great job of, and we talked about a little bit where I felt let down by that within Solo, is that the droids have personalities and you attach to them just as much as any of the other characters in the film. And K2SO, I would take K2SO in my house any day of the week.
Yes.
Just such a great character and funny and clearly had, you know, the desire to look out for Cassian, and you could feel his relationship with Jen kind of grow throughout the film as well.
Exactly. You know, and, you know, he put their needs ahead of his, you know, especially in the end. You know, and you could tell that, you know, kind of like Cassian, he had to do some things that you could tell he may not have wanted to do, you know, finding a map.
Right. Yes. He's such a great character, and another thing, I'm so excited that he will be included in the Cassian Andor series on Disney Plus, because I just can't get enough K2SO for sure, and I know you guys feel the same way. Michelle is always heartbroken about the fact that K2SO apologizes to Cassian many times throughout the film, and Cassian like, just go.
I know.
Cassian, you know,
doesn't show any appreciation.
I think he does, but he doesn't, you know, it's like, it's okay. You just want to hear him say, it's okay, K2SO, I love you.
There is a reason I want to drag you two to the void, and I'm not saying any more than that.
All right.
There's a reason I want you to experience that.
Nice, yes.
That's exciting. I'm looking forward to doing that. Maybe when you're down here in Southern California and Disneyland here, and we will take a downtown Disney jaunt and do the void there.
Twist my arm.
Yes, right?
No, I'm sure of it. Moving on through the cast, Ben Mendelsohn playing director Orson Krennic, I thought was just an awesome sort of bad guy. You know, it's kind of a go-between between Tarkin and also interesting in the fact that I think he obviously was doing evil things. He was planning evil things, but I don't think he was planning it to do evil per se, whereas I think some of these Imperials that you're used to seeing them doing evil things. You know, This is, he wanted order, but more than anything else, he wanted to advance within the Empire itself, to progress, to be a more important person within it. And so I think many of us can relate to that in many regards, not going to the lengths he went, of course, but in many regards of trying to do these things and find a way to advance within your industry. Michelle.
Right. I agree. I don't think he was intentionally always trying to be bad. Like you said, he was aspiring to be successful and to, like you said, continue to advance. And, you know, I think putting him on another side and he would have been as successful at that, and would have been able to see the need to, you know, really promote and work towards getting either side that he would be on. I just think that he's that. And maybe I'm saying that a little bit because I took the StarWars.com quiz on what Rogue One character I was.
Are you Orson Krennic?
I am.
Oh, my goodness.
I was like, what? And then I thought, well, he was smart. He was strategic.
I will say, just like him, your cape game is on point.
I know, right?
So, I think outside of Lando Calrissian, Orson Krennic may have had the best capes in Star Wars.
Yes.
So, Rob, your thoughts on Orson Krennic?
Yeah, I had a lot of things to say about Orson Krennic, but now that I found out Michelle tested as him, I think I'm just going to hold my tongue.
No, go for it. I'm okay.
No. I mean, he played the perfect kind of sycophantic ladder climbing. Just like you said, it wasn't evil for the sake of evil. It was him trying to advance his personal career, and he was willing to do any and everything that it took to get there. I think probably his biggest contribution to the entire film, apart from being the director of the Death Star Project or Project Stardust, is the awesome Death Troopers that got introduced as his personal guard in this film. So again, if they gave the rest of the stormtroopers the marksmanship training that those guys had, it might have been a different result in the original trilogy.
Right. That's true. He also has one of my favorite GIFs of all time. It's beautiful.
I thought for sure you were going to say deploy the Garrett.
Yeah, that one's good too. But I thought he was excellent and just a great sort of bad guy, but kind of that guy the best bad guys to me are guys you can kind of understand why they're doing what they're doing, and I think he fit that role totally. Donnie Yen played Chirrut Imwe, and I'm talking about another one of my favorite characters that I could see a standalone story about his backstory as well. He's a guardian of the will, but just an interesting guy, really just someone who struck the right tone in the right place, kind of filled that role, because this is another film that doesn't have, although Jedi are mentioned, obviously, with Jeddah being one of the main sources of their Kyber crystals and such, that kind of filled that Force wielder's role. Even though he wasn't really a true Force wielder, he just was kind of in touch with the Force. I think you'd agree that just another awesome character.
Right, definitely. Just another awesome character. But I think he was the yin and yang of his buddy. And I think you really kind of, when you're talking about him or thinking about him, the two of them, how they played together, how they supported each other, is also an important aspect of either of those characters.
No question. They cared about each other. It made you care about them that much
exactly.
more. Rob, your thoughts on Chirrut Imwe?
Well, first, I totally agree with what you guys said about the fact that they clearly had a very deep relationship. And that was kind of one of the things that was so cool about the character development, is that even though you didn't get to see what brought these people together, even in their small groups that they were in prior to being united under Jen, you could definitely sense that they had a long history, that they were very close, etc. I don't know that I would say that Donnie Yen's character, Chirrut, was not a Force wielder per se. I kind of look at that character as there's going to be people who are Force sensitive that get brought into the Jedi Order, and for whatever reason they may not pan out in terms of being Jedi material. They may not have the level of Force sensitivity or the level of control to be able to become a full Jedi. And with the way that the Force worked through him kind of in this film, and some of the skills that he displayed, with his energy weapon that he was able to shoot down a TIE fighter with. He couldn't see clearly, but he was seeing through the Force. So I think that he had enough Force sensitivity to be able to manipulate the Force or have the Force work through him in some small way, just not necessarily to a Jedi level extent. Right. So that's kind of my take on him. And I think he's got one of the best lines in the movie when they throw the hood over his head. Are you kidding me? I'm blind.
I can't tell you how many times we've watched this film and it still cracks me up every single time. I sort of agree with you, Rob. It's hard. I think it's kind of innocuous. You don't really know for sure. You can make assumptions to it all. There's no real proof that he is using the Force in that way. But if nothing else, he definitely is very in touch with it. He has complete faith in it. And he's as in touch with it as anybody who is not a Jedi that we've seen, I would think, in the films. But whether he was a true Force user, Force wielder, Force sensitive or not, still just a fascinating character.
This sounds like we have a potential debate episode here to do between the two of you guys.
No, I mean, I think we're more or less in the same spot. I mean, there are a couple of signs with him that he's able to do more than a normal Guardian of the Will might be able to do. Just, he can sense the kyber crystal around Jin's neck before he has any way to know about that. And really it's that, I mean, he shoots a couple of stormtroopers on Scarif, but it's that shot on Edu where he takes out the TIE fighter at just the right time to have it cannonball into that, weapons emplacement and take out the weapons turret as well. It just seemed a little bit too conspicuous that he was able to do all that, considering he couldn't see a single thing. So, but yeah, again, that's the question, right? How many Jedi or partial Jedi or failed Jedi are still floating around in the Star Wars universe at the time of the events of essentially, Episode 4?
Right. And he definitely sensed what Cassian's mission was. Feeling the darkness of the Force.
But you can feel an energy without necessarily being within the. I mean, he says the Force moves, but you can feel an energy, and I feel energies in room when something is happening.
Right.
And so, again, I do believe that he has a light Force sensitivity. He's definitely very in touch with the Force. But as far as a true Force wielder, I don't. I'd love to see more about him to find out. I'd love to see more about him in general. And
there was a lot of.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
I was just going to say there was, at the time that the movie came out, or prior to the movie coming out, there was speculation by some people that he may be Kanan Jarrus as well, which I don't think was actually the case at all. But you can totally see why, given his lack of vision and the fact that he had more than an average tie-in with the Force.
Right. No question about that. So his companion we just discussed was Baze Malbus, who was played by Zhang Wen. Interesting thing is that Star Wars has never done really well in China for whatever reason. Maybe because they couldn't really get a lot of the original trilogy films because China was pretty shut off during that time period, but never been a big deal. So part of obviously these are great characters that they brought in, great actors that they brought in, but they reached into make sure they brought in Chinese actors in part to kind of open up the market a little bit more in China. But they succeeded in bringing in a couple of actors and a couple characters that are excellent. Baze Malbus, you kind of see he's kind of that guy who's disgusted by the whole thing. He was a Guardian of the Will. Even Chirrut mentions the fact that he was one of the most dedicated Guardians of all of them until it seems like it kind of got tainted for him when they got pushed out of the temple by the Empire there, and he's just like, I'm just going to tolerate. But he, you can tell he has a closeness for Chirrut. And then, of course, it just grows and he becomes more involved again as he sees hope rising. Even though he has not a lot of lines, actually. Some of them are some of the more impactful lines within the whole movie.
Exactly. I would agree with that, and kind of to what Rob said a little earlier, too, just the fact that, that these two have had, a friendship for a long time. And it's amazing with so few lines and so few episodes in the movie that was solidified so strongly, so impactfully.
Agreed. Rob, your thoughts on Baze Malbus?
I thought he was incredibly cool, and I don't know how he made it through the entire film carrying that garbage can, the vacuum cleaner canister on his back. Really, he is the anti-stormtrooper. I don't think he missed a single thing the entire film.
Yeah,
right.
And again, it goes to it goes back to that question of how in tune with the Force were the Guardians of the Wills, and to what degree did they were they able to have the Force kind of work through them? You would assume that they had to meet some standard in order to get that position.
Yeah, I would imagine there has to be something. You're not just like, hey, you need a job,
right?
How would you like to be a Guardian of the Will? But I found him to be another fascinating character. Moving on, Mads Mikkelsen played Galen Erso, who I thought that you didn't get as much of him as you wanted, but you could totally see like he just wanted to be a father. He just wanted to take care of his family. He saw what was going wrong with the Empire and that they were getting too extreme, and he just didn't want. But he also realized he got to this point where it's like, well, I need to do this, but because they're going to do it either way, but I'm going to find a way to at least give again hope to the rebellion and how to stop this giant planet killing super weapon.
Right. No, I agree with you. That he definitely found in his life that he had to make a significant choice that was a change. And then at another point in time, he had to revert that and figure out how to deal with the circumstances he was put into place. And again, very engaging character that, you understood him. You understood what he was trying to deal with, that he just felt such a burden. And yet he was super intelligent, and he came through with a different way to accomplish what he was, hoping to be successful at, which would be destroying the Death Star.
Exactly right. Rob, your thoughts on Mads Mikkelsen and Galen Erso?
I thought it was a really kind of in-depth character in the sense that you kind of felt like you knew more about him than was revealed in the film. He obviously was a brilliant scientist, and you could see how he'd been working on the Death Star project up until a certain point, but then his conscience kind of got a hold of him, and he realized that something like that couldn't be built and not lead to the deaths of billions of people. So he basically decided that he couldn't be a part of that. And he obviously loved his wife, he loved his daughter, and ultimately ended up making a lot of sacrifices to try to keep his daughter safe. He couldn't do much for Lyra. That was kind of a pointless character for me, I guess.
Yeah.
Have a hard time understanding, a mother in that situation that's going to abandon her child,
right?
And, that's go do something as selfish and pointless as try to take out someone surrounded by stormtroopers.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was one of the if only real head scratching moment we had through this film. It was like, no, if you're a really good mother, I mean, I know you love your husband or whatever, but you're going to protect your child in this moment,
right? Well, especially since you had a plan, already in place, that once if something were to come up, you have a plan in place already. And I mean, unless she just really felt Saw was going to be sufficient, and she would do her best to still try to save her husband. I don't know.
Yeah,
well, I agree with you. It's a head scratcher.
It's a head scratcher for sure. Riz Ahmed played Bodhi Rook, the pilot, the Imperial pilot who goes and passes along Galen Erso's message to Saw Gerrera in a roundabout, tough, difficult way for him to get it there. And boy, I feel for him. But man, another interesting character. You don't get a lot of him, but the moments you do get from him, you could see he's a little nervous about the whole situation, but he knows what he needs to do is right. He knows his message is clear.
Right.
He's from Jeddah, so that speaks even more to him about the whole thing. I just found him another great character that I actually would like to know more about as well.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And just the fact that you could tell that he at some point was dealing with struggles of what he felt he was doing was not for, the most worthy cause, and that he wanted to try to, correct some of that by, getting involved with this very dangerous mission.
Right. Agreed. Rob, your thoughts, Bodhi Rook.
I thought that he played that character very well. I thought that, as opposed to like the Benicio del Toro character, DJ in The Last Jedi, where the twitchiness was just kind of contrived. I thought that, the way that Riz Ahmed chose to play his character was he just kind of seemed like a little bit of a fractured, broken guy. He clearly was having that struggle, that crisis of conscience that you're talking about. And, ultimately, it was Galen Erso who told him that if he did this mission, if he completed this mission, then it was, his path to salvation, essentially.
Right. Agreed.
Yep.
So another great character. And finally, we're going to wrap up the characters of this with Forrest Whitaker playing Saw Gerrera. He was on for so little time, but he captivated the screen whenever he was on. He was kind of showing that different side of the more extreme rebellion side. And almost, they even portrayed him out with the breathing apparatus and so many different parts of him that were metal or robotic or whatever, as like almost the rebellion's Darth Vader,
exactly.
in many regards, but showing the more terrorist version of, like, because it's all from a certain point of view, right? If you were to look at this and see these people attacking the way they are, they're very much acting like you would see terrorists acting today in this extremist version of the rebellion. I think you'd agree.
I would agree, although you see at the beginning when they are relying on him to raise their daughter, that he, and knowing those characters, you would have to think, okay, he wasn't extreme at that point, and
at least not that extreme,
right? At least not that extreme, but that he, developed that. I agree with you. He was riveting in that movie. I loved his movements. Even just when he tells her, "Come, child," I mean, the way he does his hand gesture, it's unique and it's believable with his personality. And like you said, he wasn't on for very long, but you just really were captivated. At least I was very captivated by
Agreed.
him.
And this wasn't his, at least the character's first appearance. He was also made an appearance in the Clone Wars and in Rebels as well. And you could see in that point that he was starting to have a little bit of that, extremist edge, and it's just obviously grown with some paranoia and everything else to where he was to this point. Rob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what I was going to say as well, which is that he was a character that they explored in a lot more depth within the Clone Wars. He did certainly make an appearance in Rebels, but, seeing him kind of in his genesis with the rebellion on Onderon, and at the time he had a sister named Steela who he was very much protective of, and she kind of had her character arc that played into the kind of hardened terrorist like person that he became. But if you see him within Rogue One and that's all you've seen of him, then certainly you're like, wow, he's kind of a hardcore character, but when you get to see what developed him into that throughout the Clone Wars, he becomes a much more sympathetic character.
Yeah, agreed on that. And obviously he's been pushed to the point of madness by all of this, and you can kind of call it that if you want to look at it that way. But the things that he's been through, the things that he's seen, I guess it's not shocking to you that that would drive many people to that point.
Right. I mean, to see the loss that you've experienced in your life, and then kind of push all this blame into this one entity and feel like that's your mission now, is to destroy that entity.
Right. Agreed. So we've talked a lot about this already, but let's get just to the synopsis of the film for those of you who've not seen it. If you haven't, why are you listening right now? Go watch it and then come listen to this. But the film takes us, it's just to the days right before A New Hope. As a matter of fact, it takes us 2 minutes right before A New Hope. The Empire is building, of course, the first Death Star, and with the forced aid of Galen Erso. However, he's trying to undermine its construction. Meanwhile, the fledgling Rebel Alliance is learning about its possible existence and looks to bring Jyn Erso, his daughter, on board to aid in discovering the truth. We head to several new planets as we learn the story that was alluded to in the very first Star Wars film's scroll. We also learn that there is a little gray on both the Rebellion and the Empire, and see possibly the most terrifying scene involving Darth Vader on any screen. I'm not talking about Anakin Skywalker. As far as Darth Vader, that was the ultimate Darth Vader scene.
Absolutely. It was just definitely the reminder to you, if you that Darth Vader was a bad dude. And, it kind of just brought back the feelings of when you saw the original trilogy, and feeling, how devastated Luke was when he found out that was his father, and kind of the why. Those scenes really brought that out.
Agreed. Rob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's a better scene in all of Star Wars that epitomizes just, what Darth Vader was capable of at his prime. And, some of the force abilities that he displayed in that little bender that he goes on at the end of the film. He basically soaks up blaster bolts right into his gloved hand and then basically shoots it back out at one of the rebel troopers, which is a force ability that you don't really see anywhere else. And, he just mowing through these rebel fleet troopers in an attempt to get those plans. It definitely adds to his intimidation factor and how awesome that he is. And again, I think that even feeds into enhancing the status of the Emperor when you realize that this is the guy that Darth Vader, this awesome Sith Lord, is kneeling to.
Right.
Completely agree. And interesting is we have some other friends out there who are doing a Star Wars themed podcast, or at least a series of episodes right now. Our good friend Cassie from Disflix and Tidbits is doing a Once I Watched a Star Wars series with our other good friend Tombstone Josh, who apparently has never watched a Star Wars film before. And their most recent episode of that, they went to A New Hope. And although Tombstone Josh knew a little bit about Darth Vader, he was a little surprised at how he thought he was going to be this big, bad, really bad villain. And I think, because of the fact that, we live in the era, he was big and bad in 1977 or whatever, but the era we live in now, where you see so many more villains that are big and bad, and maybe it's kind of tampered down a little bit by the of what nowadays. But if he was to go and watch this scene, he'd understand who Darth Vader is. And that's one of the things I think that is great that this scene brought across.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and in A New Hope, Vader is a little bit mitigated by the fact that it seems like kind of Tarkin has him on a leash in that film, that he's answering directly to Tarkin as opposed to being the Emperor's second in command. So, in hindsight, that definitely downplays that character a little bit.
Yeah, right. Agreed. And I think part of it is also if you look back at A New Hope, and even a little bit to Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, the fact that he's fighting with this suit on that's any suit that you build nowadays. One they can use CG now, but any suit that you build nowadays, they could be more functional, more lightweight. That had to be a clunky suit and hard to see through. And then you're also especially in A New Hope, you're battling against Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is an older fellow in his own right. There's only so much you could do with that battle to make it work. And I think they did the best they could with it, but it's obviously not going to compare to anything you could do nowadays.
Right.
So, moving on, director Gareth Edwards wanted this film to feel like a World War II film. I know Michelle talks about that all the time.
That's what my PowerPoint's all about.
There's espionage in it. The scenes on Scarif really feel like it's some of the battles from the Pacific part of World War II, that you would see in Iwo Jima or anything like that. It really has a lot of that film to that feel to it. I know you agree.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Yeah. It's hard to not think anything other than that sometimes when you're looking at it. But, I guess that it is a war movie. But yeah, so many of those scenes remind you of a lot of things that in history or growing up as a child that you saw about World War II. Right. Agreed. Rob, your thoughts?
Well, and that's very much back to George Lucas and the way that he handled the original Star Wars film, which was that, for all the dogfights in space and everything, he had a giant roll of World War II aerial footage that he had kind of pieced together to give the folks that were going to actually create that an idea of how he wanted that to play out. So again, the cool thing about this film is that Gareth Edwards really went back to approaching it in the same way that Lucas had approached the original Star Wars film, and wanted to give that same feel to it, wanted to make it feel like it was specific to that particular era of Star Wars history. And that's really, for me, a huge part of what made it work so well. You felt like you were in that exact same universe that you were in the original Star Wars film, later, renamed to A New Hope. But you're seeing characters out of it. You're seeing blue milk out of it. You're seeing, just the texture and the way that entire galaxy felt just seemed very specific to that point in time in Star Wars history.
Absolutely. It was very
and I want
fluid.
Gareth Edwards to have so many more films.
Absolutely.
I know Michelle would definitely agree with that.
Yes.
One thing that this film did is it filled in a lot of gaps if people had questions about, A New Hope, the original Star Wars film. A New Hope, how did the rebels get the plans? How did that happen? Of course, why was the Death Star so easy to take out? I mean, why did they leave this thing like it was just right in there? Like, really? That's all you got to do to take down this giant planet-killing machine? Do that? Okay. Also, what powered the Death Star? Well, there's speculation on what gave it is such huge, immense power. And then also, did the Death Star have a hyperdrive? We didn't know that up until this film. We found that it emerged out of hyperspace. So yes, obviously the Death Star did have a hyperdrive, so they could put it wherever they wanted within the galaxy in not too long a period of time, which made it even that much more terrifying that they could rush it to wherever they needed to.
Right.
So really interesting stuff. Any thoughts on that, Michelle?
No, I'm still stuck on the fact that this movie was just seconds from A New Hope and how fluid it was, how like you said, it filled in the gaps very nicely and in a logical way. There wasn't a lot of those gaps that you felt like, wait, that doesn't make sense, or that seemed very contrived. It seemed to really be well thought out in terms of how it did answer those questions and how it then had that same like I said, fluidity and feel to it.
You almost feel like every time you watch it, you have to watch A New Hope right afterwards.
I know, right?
Just to continue on the story. Rob, any thoughts on any of that I was bringing up?
I mean, again, like I said, it's my second favorite Star Wars film of all time. I loved everything about it. I thought that it was incredibly well done. And, we'll get into some of the detail on some of the things that I think make it really special in just a little bit. But it belongs as a huge part of the Star Wars universe. The fact that, like we said, it takes it right up until the events of The New Hope. I do know that there was some backlash, let's say that, by people who were saying it was just fan service and that it was kind of contrived for that purpose. But frankly, I don't care because it's just a damn good movie.
Right.
Pardon my French. And I have no complaints with it whatsoever. I think it was just incredibly well done.
I completely agree.
Right. And I mean, the fact that some of the storyline was created long ago before they even knew they were going to do this as a movie, I think, also led itself to have a lot of the strong abilities to be able to fill in some of those gaps.
Agreed with that. Now, interesting thing, and I was talking earlier about the trailers and how that some of the footage that you saw in the trailers didn't make it to the film. Well, they had to go through some reshoots later on. And matter of fact, they brought in Tony Gilroy. He was paid $5 million for 12 weeks of work on script revising and these reshoots, especially a lot of the stuff that we were just talked about in the third act.
Right.
So they brought him on. One interesting thing, and I apologize because I meant to put his name down the notes and I've lost it right there. I don't have it in my notes. But the original writer of this film was talking about how when Disney bought Lucasfilm, he was concerned that they would not be able to kill off everybody at the end. Like it had to have more of a happy ending. Like you can't just do that with Disney, but Disney was apparently all behind it. So they kind of wrote the story in a different way to begin with some of these people surviving. So they kind of had to redo that as well as some of the notes I've seen. So, but yeah, because of these reshoots, because they decided the movie wanted to have a different tone, a different feel, that's why we saw different things in the trailer from what we ended up seeing in the final finished film.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
Rob, any thoughts?
For me, it's just, it's one of those things where despite, for whatever reason that they chose to go back and do the reshoots and everything, I think that you can't argue with the fact that the way that the film turned out was exceptional. So, I can't argue with the need to go back and do the reshoots. But again, it's one of those things where the characters have such great connections. I mean, they hit on all the high points. the characters, you feel for them. The story is great. It ties in with the original Star Wars film pretty seamlessly. And I mean, overall, it just works for me. So I don't have an issue with them going back and kind of readdressing some of these issues. Right. And it certainly worked for me.
Right. I think we both agree with
totally
that,
agree.
for sure. As far as the critical reception, Rotten Tomatoes, they gave it an approval rating of 84% based on 420 reviews, with an average rating of 7.45 out of 10. The website's critical consensus reads, quote, Rogue One draws deep on Star Wars mythology while breaking new narrative and aesthetic ground and suggesting a bright blockbuster future for the franchise, end quote. IGN reviewer Eric Goldman gave the film a 9 out of 10, saying Rogue One is a movie crammed with fan service, but when fan service is done well, there's little to complain about and much to adore. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone gave the film 3.5 out of 4 stars, writing, quote, the spin-off / prequel has the same primitive, lived-in, emotional, loopy, let's put on a show spirit that made us fall in love with the original trilogy, end quote. I think that just what we've talked about here, we agree with both of those critical reviews.
Absolutely. You know, like, bottom line, like what you just said, Rob, too, is that it's just such a great film. Who cares what people are criticizing about? It's just amazing film. And it's, again, I go back to these characters. They are so rich, and like you said, it's always fun then to turn on New Hope right afterwards. And in some regards, it's like, yes, that was the beginning, and we love that for a lot of those reasons. It's just, I don't think had as many rich characters as this film did in such a short time that there were so many people that you were like, oh my God, this character is amazing. This this person is really contributing to this story so intensely.
Agreed. Rob, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's just funny because, the whole fan service thing I always laugh about, because when Star Wars gets criticized, it's for not giving the fans what they want. So they come up with a film that gives the fans everything they could possibly hope for, and then you get criticized that way. Right. So, I mean, again, it's a victim of its own success. No one, Lucas, more than anyone, didn't expect the original Star Wars film to be anywhere near the hit that it was. Right. And as a result, the expectations are set sky high, and that's why you've got fans that are, so attached to the original trilogy and so hyper focused on criticizing every little thing with the prequels and sequels. And certainly, they're not perfect films, but it's Lucas's story to tell, and there's a reason he started with the original trilogy, because that was kind of the meat of that particular story. Sure. So it's expected that some of these other films are going to have a fall off, but I love this film, and I'll stand by that.
Right. Absolutely. I agree. And also a big fan of this film is George Lucas,
right?
Who came on and said that he liked it more, because this was after The Force Awakens came out. He enjoyed it much more than The Force Awakens. And to that, director Gareth Edwards stated, his opinion means the world to me. I can die happy now.
Yeah.
Essentially. Right. Is what he said. I'm paraphrasing a little bit there, but essentially what he said about that. It did receive 2 Academy Award nominations for Best Sound Mixing and Best Visual Effects. Didn't win, but it did get the nominations. As far as box office, Rogue One grossed $532.2 million in the United States and Canada, and $523.8 million in other countries, for a worldwide total of $1.056 billion. It is the second highest. It was the second highest grossing film of 2016, the third highest grossing Star Wars film, and the 22nd highest grossing film of all time. Wow. At least at that point.
Right.
Yeah. It was the top grossing film in the U.S. in 2016. So just that, it's obviously talking about how Star Wars is much more popular in the U.S. than, say, China, which drives the market so much in some of these worldwide numbers.
Sure.
Good stuff. So let's get to some fun facts now that we've kind of gone over this, unless there's something else that either of you want to touch on before we get to fun facts.
No, I don't think so.
Rob, anything else?
I do just want to tie into the fact that, you mentioned the reshoots and everything, and this is probably the best place to tie in some of the information I've got on Michael Giacchino. Originally, this film was supposed to have a composer named Alexander Desplat doing the music for it, doing the score for it. And because of the fact that they ended up pushing the film due to some reshoots, he ended up having to drop out of the film. So Michael Giacchino actually stepped in, and he only had 4.5 weeks to prepare the score for this film.
Wow.
Which the second shortest amount of time to prepare a score for a Star Wars film was Empire Strikes Back, and I believe that was John Williams had about 8 weeks to do the score for that, and talked about what a breakneck pace that was. So, and the other kind of mitigating factor with John Williams is he knew that whole time he was going to be doing that score, so he had time to kind of think through them, different themes, and kind of have some things in his head ready to work on when he got to that point.
Sure.
As opposed to Giacchino, who came in and, he got to watch the film, and roughly 4 weeks later, he had to be on a scoring stage to actually get that performance captured.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that. So not only did he do an exceptional job of creating a score that is very much kind of in the vein of what you would expect in a Star Wars film, but he wove in a lot of very subtle things that John Williams had put into the original Star Wars film that a lot of people don't even hear. He had woven those into some of his themes, and that to me, if you get into any of the shows that do breakdowns on the soundtrack, and I know typically I don't plug other shows, but Rebel Force Radio has a series that they had done called Star Wars Oxygen, the music of John Williams, and this is the only time they covered a composer that wasn't John Williams, and talking about Rogue One. And you listen to that episode, you will get a whole new appreciation for this particular film and the score behind it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think the score is amazing.
Yeah.
I really do. We were listening as we were just watching the credits roll the other time, and you go through the mingle of, new stuff with the original stuff that John Williams composed, and it's just all incredible. And we're fans of Michael Giacchino anyway, because he's done many other films, not just obviously he did this for a Star Wars film, but he's done a lot of work outside of it and for the Disney company itself, and just always highly impressed with him. And that's even more impressive to know that. That's already fun facts.
That's
Rob.
right.
Fun facts.
It was actually supposed to be his vacation after he did the music for Doctor Strange, and he was getting ready to do Spider-Man Homecoming. So he was supposed to get about a 4-week vacation, and turned into probably one of the more stressful periods of time in his life.
I'm sure, but especially when you're, you're kind of following the master and John Williams,
right?
That's
no intimidation there.
Big shoes to fill right there. So
this is the reason that I say that John Williams has done amazing work with the soundtracks and the scores for the various Star Wars films that he's been associated with, among all the other wonderful work that he's done. But he's getting up there in age, and he's not going to be around forever, and that's kind of a scary thought as a Star Wars fan, because he really, he is creating the fabric of kind of what informs the fans on what they're supposed to be feeling in these films. And it's great to know that there are a whole generation of composers coming along behind him that have, been so heavily influenced by his work, and can do such a great job. Even in the Star Wars Battlefront games, they've got a lot of themes in those particular games that are written by other composers, but have that very John Williams feel to them.
Right.
Excellent. Nice. Cool. So let's get to more fun facts. Michelle, do you have some fun facts for us?
Well, I really enjoyed in the film all the nods to A New Hope, and obviously it was intentional because it is the step before that. But, just a lot of fun little things that they had in there, because obviously they, tie in the Death Star and Darth Vader, that they took they included R2-D2 and C-3PO. They had one of my, top 5 mouse droids in there as well. Top 5 droids from Star Wars.
That's awesome.
Just little things like the blue milk that they tied in there, and the guys who end up having a fight with Luke in the cantina show up.
Dr. Evazan and Pondo Baba.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yep.
I was going to try to say those names, but it's just those guys. Thank you, Rob, for helping.
No problem.
Pig nose,
Yes. Where what's his Bail Organa, where he talks about his Jedi friend, so you kind of know. Like I said, obviously those are important pieces to have, although some were a little less important. But I just loved the Easter eggs and all the nods to the very traditional intro to Star Wars.
ties in with Rebels too. There are many references to Rebels within that film as well. Right. Just little light nods, like you need to be listening or looking for them to see it. They're not as out there as many of the ones from A New Hope, but lots of little nods to Rebels.
You know, and I also like the fact that they found some footage from A New Hope that wasn't used in the film, and they've found ways to weave it in as well. So I thought that was very, very cool part of it too.
Agreed. Rob, do you have any fun facts for us besides the great facts you already brought up about Michael Giacchino?
Yeah. I mean, you guys have already touched on most of them. Certainly the Rebels nods. They have Chopper kind of roll by when the private is coming out to relay that Scarif was under attack with Mon Mothma kind of out on the tarmac. You can see Chopper rolling by in the background if you're a Rebels fan. Numerous shots that you can see the Ghost appearing in, which is the Rebels gang's ship from Star Wars Rebels. The Hera Syndulla reference on the intercom within the temple on Yavin 4. And then I think the footage Michelle was talking about was, Red Leader and Gold Leader from the original Star Wars. You get that nice little piece of, kind of candy that they stick out there about how Red 5 opened up for Luke.
Right.
So there was a lot of cool things that they did there. Admiral Raddus was a great character. He actually, there's a flagship, Akbar's flagship, I believe, is named after General Raddus in the original Star Wars trilogy.
Well, it's also in The Last Jedi. It's the ship that they're on there is the Raddus, I believe. Yeah.
Was it I'm sorry, it was The Last Jedi, not the original trilogy. But certainly some really cool references that they kind of tie in there. But in general, most of it is music related, and I don't want to get too deep into it on this particular show. I think I'm just going to leave it at go out and check out that Star Wars Oxygen. I believe it's episode 38. They don't do episodes of it anymore, but it's David W. Collins is the guy behind the analysis, and he actually has his own show now called The Soundtrack Show, and I'm hopeful that he'll go back and finish his Rogue One analysis someday. Nice. I've offered to have him come on my podcast if he'd ever be so inclined to talk about this stuff, but he's a busy guy. He does a lot with Star Wars Celebration, and he's tied in pretty tightly with Lucasfilm. So it's a whole nother layer of amazing things that you can see within the Star Wars galaxy once you start digging into what they're doing with those soundtracks, and it's totally worth checking out if you're interested in music and Star Wars at all. Great.
Now I'll post a link to it in our show notes, so if anybody wants to check it out, they can. I'll definitely get that out there for you for sure. So, as far as I've got a couple of fun facts, and one is my favorite fun facts of Rogue One, and that's the fact that the name of the planet Scarif, apparently according to Gareth Edwards, came to him because he went into a Starbucks, gave his name, and apparently they gave him on a coffee cup with the name Scarif on it. And so he was looking for a name for this planet, and so that's how he transformed it to Scarif. It's one of my, I don't even know if it's true, but it's a great story one way or the other. I just love that story. Rogue One is the first Star Wars movie, remember this is before Solo, Star Wars story came out, that never mentioned the word Skywalker at any point within it. We already talked about the Jedi are mentioned in this, but there's no actual Jedi shown, but they don't even mention the Skywalkers at all. Rogue One is the first also theatrical Star Wars movie to have dialogue in the closing scene, with the very last word being spoken at the end as hope.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I found that interesting. And of course, it's the first Star Wars film that came out without a scroll. They decided that they're just going to leave that for the Skywalker Saga films, at least until the Skywalker Saga is done. I guess they can, reassess after that. But they were not going to do these in these standalone films, and Solo followed suit with that, not doing a scroll as well.
Right.
So. Cool stuff as far as Rogue One, a Star Wars story. As far as legacy of this film, I don't know. I'm looking forward to finding out more when the Cassian Andor series comes out for Disney Plus and seeing where that goes. I would love to see more backstory on Jyn Erso. I would love to see more backstory on Chirrut and Baze. I would love to see more backstory actually on Saw Gerrera, and see what he went through from the difference between, obviously we saw a little bit of him in Rebels, but how he got from there to this point, and also in, of course, the Clone Wars as well. I think it's a fascinating film. I think it's going to end up being one of the better received films of all the Star Wars films we've seen, and definitely of the new ones. I just find it fascinating. Any thoughts on the legacy from either of you two? Michelle?
I agree with you in terms of those characters and wanting to know and see more about them. And I think personally, I'd like to see that kind of in standalone kind of things rather than just in the mix with things like shows like Rebels, etc. And not that that's bad, but I think just because they are so riveting, that I would really want to have a lot of attention drawn to and focus to how they, really developed, what went through their life to get them to where they are.
Exactly. Rob, any thoughts on the Rogue One's legacy?
Yeah, I think that it's certainly going to have a very long legacy. I think that because of the way that they crafted this film and the fact that it ties in so seamlessly with the original trilogy, that it's going to have the same kind of long life that those films had. It just thematically and visually, it just feels so much like those films, and they have been going strong for 42 years at this point and counting. And I think that it's just going to be enhanced by some of the additional content that I'm sure that's going to come out on the Disney Plus streaming service. We know the Cassian and, the Cassian and K2SO are going to be reappearing, and who knows if any of these other characters are going to tie in. I'd love to get backstory on Chirrut and Baze, like you were mentioning, and that's certainly something that they could look into. The whole concept of the wills in general is something that goes back all the way to the second draft of the original Star Wars film. It was supposed to be the adventures of Starkiller. Let me see here. What was the Adventures of the Starkiller? Episode 1, The Star Wars, was the original title that was part of draft 2, and it all tied back to some information that had come out of what was called the Journal of the Wills. So they have a lot of stuff that they could explore with that as well.
Right.
Totally agree. And
actually, I'm sorry, I forgot to throw this in with the fun facts, but the Wills actually were, it was one of the shamans of the Wills that had taught Qui-Gon the secret to kind of maintaining his consciousness after death as well.
Yeah, so the idea of Force Ghosts comes from the Wills.
Yep. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. So that is another fun fact.
That's right.
So I also find that this film is seriously rewatchable. It's one of those films. I mean, I'm this way with most Star Wars films when they pop on the television, but if Rogue One's on at any point, or if I'm looking for a Star Wars film to watch, I enjoy watching Rogue One over and over and over again, and I have not gotten sick to this point. And like I said, some of the jokes and some of the other things, they still strike me as funny every single time I watch it.
Right. So. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think just because of the richness of the characters and the story, it's not a story that you can, say you could poke a lot of holes in. It's solid. And when you watch it, you can see other little details. Again, the storyline, but it very rewatchable for sure.
Agreed. So that's our look back at Rogue One, a Star Wars story. We'd love to know what you think about this film. If you have any thoughts on the characters, the film itself, the legacy, whatever it be, please hit us up on social media, through email, whatever. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And Rob, thank you again for joining us. We always enjoy your input on all these, as on everything, by the way. And you should check out his show, the Jedi Temple Archives podcast. Rob, please tell our listeners how they can find your show.
Yeah, we're basically anywhere you want to listen to podcasts. If you happen to listen on a platform and you can't find us, definitely reach out to us. We can be reached at jtapodcast@gmail.com, and on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest at JTA Podcast. often on Twitter. So if you have anything that you want to talk about, definitely hit us up there as well. And we typically put out shows on Tuesdays. Tom often joins me. Michelle occasionally joins me. We're going to be, I think, working on trying to get a date to talk about the droids.
Yeah.
So Michelle has some things that she wants to weigh in on with that, including her little rolling lunch.
She's already given her number 5, apparently. So.
Right.
Spoiler alert.
Was that 5A or 5B?
Oh, darn. That's right.
Right.
You know her too well, Rob.
Yes.
You know her too well. So definitely check out his show. It's a great show. It's the Star Wars podcast that doesn't make you feel like a jerk.
And by the way, kudos for all the great pins. I've been collecting some of your pins on Pinterest. Good job.
I will relay that onto my wife. She is my Pinterest partner in crime. That's her area of expertise. Nice. So
we love your lovely wife, Kim. So
yes.
Well. And by the way, those business cards you just created, those are spot on. I'm so jealous of those business cards. Those are things of beauty for sure.
Well, much appreciated. I'm looking forward to getting them in hand here. And, I just figured if I had a couple in my pocket and, you got people who are trying to figure out what the Aurebesh is out at Disney World or Disneyland, and their phone's kind of running low on battery. I can't imagine how that would happen in the Disney parks these days.
I know, right?
It might be handy to have a little Aurebesh translator on the back. So I threw that in there for my personal amusement, and hopefully someone else will get some use out of it.
Right. Yep. So if you run into Rob at the Disney parks or anywhere in general for that, you're going to have to hit him up for one of those business cards because they are awesome. They're outstanding. And I'm thinking I want to hire him to do our next group of business cards because they're that good.
Enjoy tinkering in Photoshop.
Yeah. Nice. Well, Rob, thanks again for joining us. So we look forward to having you on next month again. Star Wars, remember, we're moving into the original trilogy. That's right. The original Star Wars film, later entitled, of course, Episode 4, A New Hope. We're excited to break that one down as well as we progress through this Star Wars Remembered series. So, Rob.
Terrific. I'm just looking forward to talking about the original trilogy with you guys. That's where we really get into the good stuff.
Exactly.
We'll have a lot of fun. So, Rob, thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate it.
You bet. You guys have a great day.
You too. Thanks. So thanks again to Rob LeBerry from the Jedi Temple Archives podcast. Really is a great show. Definitely go check it out. If you have any interest in Star Wars at all, even if you don't feel like you know a lot about Star Wars, he does a really great job of breaking it down, simplifying it. So, even the layman person within the Star Wars world can learn about these things and feel like you know a little more as you go and watch the movies or see the animated series or read the books or whatever the case may be.
Right. Yeah. I love his vast knowledge. And so he can kind of weave that, whatever you're having a discussion on, whether it be the original trilogies or some of the animated series, etc., and how he can really help get a better understanding of how that all weaves together. I really find him riveting.
Nice. He's just a really great guy. He and his wife, Kim, are just two of our very best friends, and they're just really, really wonderful people. And we're looking forward to be seeing, they're actually coming out to Disneyland here in just less than a couple months now, and we're very excited to visit with them again very soon. But let's move on away from Star Wars. Well, not really, actually. We're going to stay kind of within the Star Wars as we move to our Disney stories of the week. Every week there's so many Disney stories. We try to get to at least a few of them to kind of round out our show. And this week we're going to start with, there have been changes to the reservation policy for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at the Disneyland Resort. This straight from the Disney Parks blog. To make your trip planning easier and give you more flexibility, Oga's Cantina and Savi's Workshop now offers advanced reservations. As you know, before this, you would kind of make a reservation for either of those spots they would open up at 7 a.m. on the day of. So that's how you do. Now they're kind of going to make it similar to the ADRs when you're going out to the parks for any of your dining reservations. They're going to open it up on a re-reserved basis. So right now you can make the reservations for up to 14 days in advance. Soon they're going to move that for Oga's and Savi's. It will be the same 60-day reservation process they currently offer for the restaurants and experiences requiring reservations. For more information and to make reservations, visit Disneyland.com/cantina or Disneyland.com/Savi's Workshop hand-built lightsabers, you can just go to the Galaxy's Edge website on Disneyland, and that might be easier for you, but that's how you can find it. You can also go to the Disneyland app, and that will help you out along the way as well.
Right. It's interesting how they are trying different styles of doing access to the Galaxy's Edge park and how to get into things or reserve things, and working out all those kinks and bugs so that they have, a very smooth process when they have their opening at Hollywood Studios at Walt Disney World.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We said this really to begin with, how this was going to kind of be a work in progress as they went through this, trying to have a trial and error process, seeing what works, how they can make it better. And we've seen them constantly changing things as they move along, and they've decided let's give people the more opportunity to know going in that they can get into this land. So if they're planning a trip 60 days out, whatever the case may be, they know for sure they're going to be able to get into Star Wars Galaxy's Edge if they make these reservations.
Exactly.
So I like that, and the only problem is that we were thinking about yesterday going and just taking a spur of the moment run in the evening, because we haven't seen Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at night yet. So we were thinking about going, but the reservations were all gone, and we're like, do we want to go all the way up there? And would that the only thing we want to do, and maybe not even get into Star Wars Galaxy's Edge? So we just kind of decided to delay it to a date in the future where we're going to go out there and visit in the evening to check out Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at night. So, but interesting stuff. Let's move on, but we're going to stay at the Disneyland Resort. We now know when you'll be able to get your holiday on at the happiest place on earth, or more, the merriest place on earth. This again from Disney Parks blog. The Disneyland Resort will once again transform into the merriest place on earth as guests begin their holidays here November 8th through January 6th. This festive season will include many holiday traditions, including cheerful entertainment, Yuletide treats, specialty merchandise, sparkling decor, and seasonal transformations of select attractions. We've said this in the past. I still believe it to this day, although they're doing a better job at Walt Disney World. And yes, there are a lot of great holiday decorations at the Walt Disney World Resort. If you're going to go square foot by square foot of decorations and who does it better, Disneyland, I think the whole Disneyland Resort, including Disney California Adventure and Disneyland Park, does a better job of their holiday decorations encompassing, again, square foot by square foot.
Right. I would agree. First of all, the number of attractions with the holiday overlays is fantastic and a little bit more expansive here on the West Coast. And when you look at California Adventure, especially in Cars Land, the uniqueness of their holiday decorations, I agree with you that, here is, square foot by square foot comparison. They do a great job here.
Yeah. And obviously we've seen some things where Walt Disney World is going to be upping their game. They're adding more to Animal Kingdom this year. So we'll see how we're actually going to be out there in December. So we'll be able to see how it compares now. But coming into this, Disneyland had taken a slight lead in their holiday decorations, in my opinion. Again, just measuring pound for pound, not, looking at, of course, there are going to be more decorations than Walt Disney World. It's just that much larger.
Exactly.
So moving on with this story, at Disney California Adventure Park, World of Color Season of Light will dazzle with its holiday-themed spectacular of lights, lasers, water, fire, and hundreds of fountains bringing animation to life. Festival of Holidays returns, which we love. More chance to sample all sorts of holiday foods. We love that. And that will also have the sounds and tastes of Christmas / Navidad, Hanukkah, Diwali, Kwanzaa, and Three Kings Day going on January 3rd through January 6th, if you're happy to be heading out there during that time. For the residents of Cars Land, 2 attractions rely on holiday magic to transform into Luigi's Joy to the World and Mater's Jingle Jamboree. We love those,
both of those
holiday
are great.
layovers. Right. Yes. At Disneyland Park, holiday magic shines brightly with the glistening Sleeping Beauty's Winter Castle. Returning entertainment includes Believe in Holiday Magic, Fireworks Spectacular, and a Christmas Fantasy Parade. In addition, one-of-a-kind seasonal transformations will once again take over It's a Small World Holiday and Haunted Mansion Holiday, which actually kicks off the Halloween season.
Right.
And actually is not that far away.
I know.
It's coming up before you know it out at
That's
Disneyland.
exciting. That's fun.
Those are just great holiday layovers.
Yeah.
We love them both.
Looking forward to them.
Yeah. It's very exciting.
It is.
Holiday season's coming around.
I know.
Yeah. And yeah, also Disneyland does such a great job with their Halloween decorations as well.
Right.
They're just so good. Definitely, it's not even close. I mean, you can argue if you want about the Christmas time / holiday, decorations, Walt Disney World versus Disneyland. Halloween, Disneyland blows the doors off of Walt Disney World as far as what they do, at least up to this point. Again,
right.
So anyway, let's move on. We've got one more story before we wrap up our Disney stories of the week, and it's just a really quick one. It was announced today that Walt Disney Company, their films broke this weekend the record that they already held for the most box office combined of their films. They were before, it was $7.61 billion, which they set just last year, through, of course, all the way through December.
Wow.
They just passed this week the $7.67 billion mark. We are just wrapping up July, heading into August. We still have, Frozen 2 coming out. We still have Maleficent 2. We still have, there's many other films, including Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. True. They're going to blow the doors off of their record that they set last year.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty impressive.
So, yeah.
Not surprising, but pretty impressive.
I mean, when you look at the box office for all these films, you start, of course, with Avengers Endgame, which set the box office total for all films record, and then you throw in Captain Marvel, which did over $1 billion, Spider-Man Far From Home, which has done over $1 billion. I believe Aladdin passed $1 billion recently. The Lion King was whatever you thought about the film, it was a box office smash for the first couple weeks, and all these other films, Toy Story 4, of course, doing great. It's just been, and we knew this going in when we saw this slate of films coming out. We're like, wow, this is going to crush at the box office. And sure enough, it's coming to fruition.
Yeah. Very exciting.
So that's it for our Disney stories of the week. But Michelle, do you have something you want to share?
Yeah, just a couple things to let people to be aware of and take a look at. So right now, well, actually, tomorrow in our time right now, so July 29th through August 18th, annual pass holders for Disney World can have a couple extra perks.
Ooh,
so
I love extra perks, especially for pass holders, because we just happen to be pass holders.
So during that time span, and again, July 29th through August 18th, they can get reserved seating for the concert series at American Gardens Theater. You go to the Japan side of the entryway and show your annual pass holder and your ID. You can get special holding reserved seating there. You get a 10% discount at Fife and Drum and Block and Hans, including on alcohol during that time frame. So again, July 29th through August 18th. And then also going a little bit longer than that, July 29th through August 28th, there is a special secret treat. Yes, secret. For annual pass holders at Sunshine Seasons inside the Land Pavilion. So you just have to ask for the secret menu item.
Secret.
I know, isn't that cool?
And you have to have a code word.
You have to have your annual pass.
I guess this Rogue One stuff, the espionage.
I know,
and all that,
right? Exactly.
Secret.
And
is it Stardust? Is that the code word you need?
Well, no, you don't need the code word.
Oh, sorry.
But you do need the proper credentials.
Perfect.
Right?
I like it.
And then lastly, that they've announced a lot of their New Year's Eve celebrations that are going on there. And I won't go through all of them. You can go to Disney Parks blog for that. But that just came out this week on July 25th, where they talked about all the different parties that they're going to have to ring in the new year.
Yeah, so many cool parties if you're out there for New Year's.
A lot of nice choices.
We were talking about, we're not going to be out there for New Year's, unfortunately, but we were like, whoa, that sounds cool. Whoa, that's nice. And whoa, that's expensive, but that sounds really cool.
Yeah, I think they have a little bit more variety now of some price ranges. Yeah. I mean, none of them cheap, but I mean, I think they do have a little bit more variety now as well.
Yeah, I think if you're going out there for New Year's, you're kind of looking for an extra way to celebrate. Right. And, this is one of those things. I mean, yes, you can always kind of do it on your own and figure out how you want to celebrate on your own. But, sometimes it's nice to just have some of these things taken care of for you, so you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it. It's
exactly.
It's done, and you'll pay that extra price. And like you said, there is a wide range of prices that you can look for depending on what kind of party you're looking for.
Exactly.
So good stuff. So, again, Michelle brings great stories. And other thing that she brings is great tips. Michelle always has the best tips. We never wrap up a show without giving you some tips that might help you on your trips to the parks, whether you're going on Disney Cruise Line, whether you're doing Run Disney, whatever the case may be. And we always know Michelle has the very best tips. So let's get right to it. Here is Michelle's tip of the week.
You're just so kind, sweetie. So my tip actually could be applied to any of those things, whether you're talking about a trip to the parks or on a Disney cruise or on a Run Disney. And that is, especially if you have kids that you're bringing along, but this tip can go for adults as well, is to create a daily countdown activity. So one of the ones that we've used is that you can take like a mason jar and put an M&M in for every day from that point to when the trip is happening. So it can be the countdown that way. If you want to be a little more health conscientious, you could do almonds or something like that, or you can come up with other types of your own countdown activities to do.
Advent calendar of some sort that you put together.
Exactly. So whether you're doing it for someone else or your own child or a spouse or even for yourself, it's just a fun way to help build that anticipation that a fun trip is about to happen.
Especially if you're like trudging through, for yourself, do it for yourself. Even if you're trudging through work and it don't seem to be going your way, or you're having problems with whatever your boss got on you, or whatever. It's nice to have something that you can look up on your desk or just pop up on your computer, and it's like, it's only 21 days till you're on vacation or whatever. And it brightens your day every time you open one of those up or see something that kind of makes you think like, oh, we're counting down to it. It's coming up. It'll be here before you know it.
Exactly.
And, why just have the magic be only when you're at the resort, right? You're at the parks. Have it extend out for weeks before as you're going into it, so you can enjoy the magic all year round if you really want to. You start planning, and so that one of the best ways to get rid of the Disney blues is to start planning your next trip. So you can start your next Advent calendar right from there. Even if it's 2 years off, go ahead, count down for 2 years, whatever the case may be.
And it's a fun way for kids to be able to see, as that jar begins to empty more and more, that it's getting closer, and have that ability to kind of comprehend then, hey, the trip is coming up, and that's cool.
Right. Agreed. I think that's a great tip. Again, Michelle's tips, always the very, very best tips. Now for my really not even secondary, this is like bottom of the barrel tip. I'm going to actually rehash a tip, but it's my favorite tip, and it's an important tip. And that is, we talked about it earlier in the show. Look, we're wrapping up July. We're heading into August. It reached here in Southern California in the mid 90s out at Disneyland Park this week. It's been hot for months and almost is all the time year round at the Walt Disney World Resort. Please, people, don't forget to hydrate. It's just so many easy ways to do this. You can bring bottles of water or better yet, even bring your own water bottle into the park, and you can refill it at many different locations. At Disneyland, they recently added some more water filling stations. We saw one, as a matter of fact, when we were in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, as we were leaving Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. They have a water bottle filling area there, but they're adding more in Tomorrowland and a couple other places in the park. They're adding them. They have one, I believe it's at Flight of Passage in Pandora. They have one, but they have them in a couple other places around the Walt Disney World Resort, and they're adding more there as well. But even if you don't bring a bottle of water or a water bottle to fill there, just go up to any place where they have fountain drinks, any quick service restaurant, and just ask for a cup of ice water. They give it to you completely free. It just helps so much. Your body really needs that water to make it through, especially in this heat and humidity and such. And it really is, you will wear down if you're not keeping hydrated at the parks. You'll get crankier faster. You'll get obviously more exhausted faster. You could get sick easier. There are just so many things that hydration are very important for. So, take that extra step. Even if you're not thinking you're thirsty, just go ahead when you have a chance to get some water in you and and do it, because there may be times where it's easy for you to do it. So take advantage of every step, and it really will help you in the long run. We all get the after Disney bug a little, not all the time, but afterwards. Staying hydrated helps fight that in many ways. Being hydrated helps keep your health at an optimum level all the time. You should do it at home, but definitely do it when you're in the parks.
Absolutely. And that is really a key thing. And you want to have you want to get the most out of your fun at a Disney park. And, one of the ways to do that is to make sure that you aren't getting dehydrated, and because that's just going to affect your mood, like you said, how you feel, and, it decreases that enjoyment. So keep it up. It's also, a good way to stop and take a breather and have, some water to hydrate and, get that energy level back up.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Good tip.
Thank you.
Very good tip.
Again, it's a rehash
Important
of something
tip.
I've mentioned several times, because it is one of the most important things to me. But I figured right now, as we're heading into really the dog days of summer, when it's really going to get hot, on both coasts, that it's probably something to revisit. And many of you maybe, you may have just picked up this podcast a few weeks ago, for all I know, and you maybe have not heard me do that. So sometimes I like to rehash what I feel are important tips. That, and I was lazy this week and couldn't find another one.
No, it is a good tip, and not just here, of course, anywhere. But I know that I was reading this past week with the heat wave going on in Europe, that at Disneyland Paris, they actually had to, some of the floats with some of the characters that are in costume, and they're kind of heavy costumes, that they had to keep them from the parade because it was going to put them at risk because of the heat.
They're going to be out there for more than what the normal 30 minutes that they get.
Right, exactly. And so, it's a good tip for everybody. Stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated, ladies and gentlemen. Please stay hydrated.
Good tip.
Thank you. That's it for this week's show. Next week, we're going to have another guest. It's going to be 3 weeks. Is it 3 weeks in a row? 3 weeks in a row with us, where we're going to have another guest join us. And we're so excited for this one. We've already been on their show, and they're going to join us for our show. It's Keenan and Rachel from Part of Our World podcast. We have so much fun with them on social media, and we had a great time with them on their podcast, which is another wonderful show that you should check out. We're going to be bringing them on our show, and we're going to be talking a little bit about Walt Disney World in a little different way that I think you're all going to have some fun with. What? What's that? What?
No clues here. They're wonderful. We enjoy, we're big fans of their podcast and enjoy their podcast. So, it's good to check out theirs. Although we're both Disney podcasts, we cover things differently, different types of information. And so there is no redundancies there. It's just a fun group. And we love that they're going to be on our podcast and honoring us with their engagement with us here.
Right. Yes. We've mentioned several different shows and blogs and stuff on our show today, and definitely including Keenan and Rachel and Part of Our World podcast. We don't mention them if we don't like them, if they're not people that we enjoy interacting with social media wise, if it's not shows that we eventually either have already had on our show or intend to have in the future, and possibly be having us on theirs if they're so willing. We love all these people, and there's a good reason why we mention them on our show.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us this week. Please, just like with all these other podcasts and bloggers that we've mentioned, follow them on social media as well. If you follow us, please find us at Twitter at Hyperion Podcast, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest at Hyperion Adventures Podcast. And if you ever want to reach out to us for any reason, you can email us at HyperionAdventurespodcast@gmail.com.
And we really would appreciate it if you could take a moment and listening to our show is to give us a rating, and even better, a little review. But most importantly, also tell a friend.
Yes, please tell a friend about us. That's the easiest and best way to get the word out about this podcast. A review is wonderful. I know it takes a little time, but that's great. Even just a rating, if you just click the stars, that is great as well. Yes, we appreciate. We've gotten some wonderful reviews to this point, and any more that we get, we appreciate them all. Thank you so very much. Of course, the best place to find this show is on our website, HyperionAdventuresPodcast.com. please, if you want to hear more from us, sign up for our new newsletter. That's going to be coming out here in the very near future. You can also, of course, find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iHeartMedia. Lots of places to find us. So thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Hyperion Adventures podcast. We look forward to sharing some time with you again next week. But until that time, I'm Tom.
I'm Michelle.
And we hope that you have a magical week.